A woman whispers, "Basement," to 911 from inside a quiet blue house. Police rush in, clean rooms, calm owner, no victim, and a basement locked from the outside. They're about to leave, until a faint sound comes from behind the wall. What they break open next changes everything. They said the house on Hawthorne Lane was empty. They said the screams the neighbors heard were just foxes in the woods. But on a freezing night in Ashford Ridge, Oregon, a 911 call lasted only 11 seconds. A woman whispered one word: "Basement." Then the line went dead. 3 hours later, police found the front door wide open, the lights still on, and a trail of wet footprints leading down the hallway, but no victim. No blood. No struggle. No sign anyone had ever been there. Only a camera, hidden behind a broken smoke detector. What investigators would eventually uncover inside that house would shake an entire county, destroy a respected family name, and reveal how easily someone can vanish in plain sight without ever leaving town. Tonight's story is not about a killer hiding in the shadows. It's about someone everyone trusted. And if you think you'd notice something like this happening next door, you're probably wrong. Stay with me until the end, because the final discovery in this case forces one terrifying question. How long could someone be trapped beneath your feet before you realize they're gone? At 1:17 a.m. on January 14, 2019, the emergency dispatcher in Jackson County received a call from a blocked number. A woman was crying so quietly it barely registered on the recording. "My name is Emily Carter," she whispered. I can't talk loud. He's upstairs." The dispatcher asked for her location. There was a long pause. Then, trembling, she said, "Ashford Ridge, Hawthorne Lane, Blue House. Please hurry." The dispatcher tried to keep her talking. Emily's breathing turned sharp and broken, like she was pressing a hand over her mouth. "I'm in the basement," she whispered. "There's no door. It locks from the outside." A sudden sound echoed through the call, slow footsteps on wooden stairs. Emily froze. The dispatcher heard something else. A soft metallic click. That was when Emily whispered one final word. "Found." The call ended. When deputies arrived less than 8 minutes later, the house was silent. Perfectly staged. Fresh coffee on the counter. A television still glowing in the living room. But the basement door was bolted shut from the outside. And no one named Emily Carter officially lived at that address. The Blue House on Hawthorne Lane belonged to Daniel Pierce, 39, community volunteer, high school track coach, recently widowed. When deputies knocked, he answered in sweatpants and a hoodie, eyes heavy with what looked like real confusion. "A woman called 911 from inside your home," the officer said. Daniel blinked. "There's no one here but me." He stepped aside without hesitation. The house smelled clean. Almost aggressively clean. No overturned furniture. No open windows. No signs of a struggle. Daniel calmly explained that he lived alone. Had for almost 2 years. He said he'd spent the entire night watching old game highlights in the living room and falling asleep on the couch. The officers checked every room. Spare bedroom. Empty. Bathroom. Dry sink. Garage. Locked tools, neatly arranged. Then they reached the basement. Daniel's hand tightened around the railing. "I don't really use it," he said quietly. "Just storage." The basement door was metal. Bolted. From the outside. One of the deputies asked why. Daniel shrugged. "Old house," he said. "The latch sticks." Inside the basement, the lights flickered on. Concrete floor. Cardboard boxes. Broken furniture. Nothing else. No woman. No phone. No place a person could hide. But one deputy noticed something that didn't belong. Fresh boot prints. pressed into dust, leading straight toward the far wall. The deputy tapped the far basement wall with his knuckles. Solid. He knocked again. This time, the sound changed. Not hollow. Not solid. Muted. Like something thick was pressed behind it. "Do you mind if we move these boxes?" the deputy asked. Daniel forced a small smile. "Go ahead." Two officers slid the stacked cardboard aside. Behind them was a section of wall that didn't match the rest. Newer paint. Smoother concrete. No dust. One officer crouched and ran his fingers along the floor seam. There was a faint line. Perfectly straight. A cut. "Have you done any recent renovations?" the deputy asked. Daniel shook his head too quickly. "No. I wouldn't even know how." They pressed harder. The wall didn't echo. It absorbed the sound. That was when the radio on one officer's shoulder crackled. Dispatch was calling back about the 911 trace. The signal hadn't come from a cell phone tower. It had come from inside the house. From directly beneath the living room. The deputy stepped closer to the patched wall. He leaned in. And for just half a second, he thought he heard it. A soft, desperate scrape. From the other side. The deputy put his ear against the patched concrete. Nothing. He pulled back. Then, 3 faint taps. Slow. Uneven. Human. Every officer in the room froze. "Did you hear that?" one whispered. Daniel laughed softly. "You're imagining things. Old houses make noise all the time." The deputy didn't answer. He drew his flashlight and traced the seam in the floor again. Perfect rectangle. About 6 feet wide. 7 feet tall. A door. Hidden inside the wall. They asked Daniel to step upstairs. This time, he hesitated. "I really don't understand what you think you're going to find." 2 officers positioned themselves beside him anyway. In the basement, a crowbar slid into the thin crack. The first pull snapped off a strip of paint. The second pull broke through the surface. Behind the concrete was not insulation. Not wood. It was steel. A welded panel. Someone had built a second wall behind the first one. The scraping came again. Clearer now. From inside. A weak voice pressed against metal. "Please, don't stop." One officer dropped the crowbar. Another radioed for fire rescue. Upstairs, Daniel sat very still. His hands were shaking. But he was smiling. Fire rescue arrived in less than 6 minutes. It felt longer. Much longer. The basement filled with the sound of power tools cutting through metal. Sparks flew against the concrete floor. The hidden panel vibrated with every strike. From behind it, the voice grew weaker. "I can't feel my legs." The saw finally broke through. A narrow opening peeled away. And the smell hit first. Stale air. Sweat. Something sour and metallic. A flashlight beam slipped through the gap. Inside was not a room. It was a box. A narrow steel compartment, barely wide enough for a mattress on the floor. A woman lay curled on her side. Her wrists were zip-tied behind her back. Her ankles bound. Her mouth raw and cracked, tape marks still visible on her skin. Her eyes were open, but unfocused. When the paramedic called out to her, she didn't answer. She flinched instead, like she expected to be punished for making noise. One officer whispered her name. "Emily." Her lips moved. Almost silently. He said, "No one would ever look behind a wall." Upstairs, Daniel's smile finally disappeared. At the hospital, no one could confirm who Emily Carter was. Not in state records. Not in driver databases. Not in missing person reports. The nurse asked her name again, slowly this time. The woman stared at the ceiling for several seconds, like the answer had to travel a long distance to reach her mouth. "Emily," she whispered. "Just Emily." A trauma doctor noted something strange. Her injuries weren't consistent with a short captivity. Severe muscle atrophy. Deep pressure sores along her hips and shoulder. Healed bruising beneath newer ones. She hadn't been trapped for days. Or weeks. She had been hidden for months. A detective finally asked the question everyone avoided. "How long were you in that room?" Her fingers tightened around the hospital blanket. She swallowed. "Since the summer." It was January. When asked how she met Daniel Pierce, her breathing sped up immediately. "I didn't," she said. Her eyes filled. "He met me." She explained that she cleaned houses for cash after losing her apartment. One job. One recommendation. One blue house on Hawthorne Lane. She had gone into the basement to check a water leak. And when she turned around, the stairs were gone. A wall stood where the doorway had been. Detectives returned to the blue house the next morning with a warrant. What they found upstairs looked ordinary. What they found behind the walls did not. Inside the hallway closet, hidden behind a removable shelf, was a narrow control panel wired through the studs and down into the basement. It controlled one thing. The steel door. A magnetic lock. Opened only from inside the house. Only from that panel. The basement stairs had never been removed. They were still there. They were just sealed inside the hidden compartment with Emily. The entire staircase had been converted into her cage. At the bottom of the steps, investigators found a tiny camera mounted high in the corner. It faced the mattress. Faced the bucket in the corner. Faced her. Upstairs, in Daniel Pierce's living room, another monitor sat neatly inside a drawer beneath the television. When technicians powered it on, a frozen image filled the screen. Emily, curled against the wall. Eyes open. Staring upward. Timestamps showed the feed had run almost continuously. For more than 5 months. But the most disturbing discovery came from the control panel itself. There were scratch marks around the buttons. On the inside, Emily hadn't only tried to escape. She had learned exactly where the lock was. And she had been pounding on it. From the wrong side of the wall. Daniel Pierce didn't ask for a lawyer at first. He asked for water. He sat at the interview table with his shoulders slumped, like the night had simply exhausted him. Then the detective placed a single photo in front of him. Not of Emily. Of another house. Different street. Same layout. Same narrow basement. Same far wall. The property records showed Daniel had owned it 3 years earlier. Sold quietly. Fast. Below market value. Investigators had gone there that morning. Behind the storage shelves in that basement. They found the outline. The exact same rectangular cut in the floor. The same patched concrete. The same hidden steel frame. But this one was empty. No mattress. No bucket. No camera. Only something wedged between the metal panel and the wall. A cracked phone. The battery was dead. But the SIM card still worked. Inside were dozens of voice memos. A woman's voice. Not Emily. Crying. Begging. Whispering a name over and over. "Daniel, please. I won't tell. I swear." When the detective played the first recording, Daniel's face changed. Not fear. Recognition. He closed his eyes. And quietly said, "She wasn't supposed to find the panel." Forensics finally pulled the data from Daniel Pierce's laptop. At first, it looked harmless. Spreadsheets. Color-coded schedules. Cleaning appointments. Names. Addresses. Small notes beside each entry. Lives alone. No close family. Cash only. Recently moved. Detectives slowly realized what the file really was. Not a work calendar. A selection list. Emily's name was there, highlighted, with a single note beside it. Basement access. When investigators lined up the spreadsheet with property records, something else emerged. Every address matched a house Daniel had either owned or viewed with a real estate agent. Every layout was nearly identical. Long hallway. Living room above the basement stairs. Far wall in the same position. The second house was not an accident. It was a rehearsal. The first woman's recordings were dated 2 years earlier. They stopped suddenly. No final goodbye. No police call. Just silence. The detective leaned forward. What happened to the first woman, Daniel? He stared at the table. For a long time. Then he lifted his eyes. She started screaming. The room went quiet. So I fixed the mistake, he said calmly. The detective whispered, "What mistake?" Daniel replied, letting her know she could be heard. Daniel Pierce was charged that afternoon. Kidnapping, aggravated assault, unlawful imprisonment. But the detectives knew the case was still missing something. Someone. Emily survived surgery. She survived withdrawal. She survived the first night alone in a real bed. But on the third day in the hospital, she finally told them what she had never said out loud. There was a routine. Every night at exactly 10:30, the light would turn on inside the hidden compartment. The camera would click, and Daniel would speak through a small vent cut into the steel wall. Not to threaten her, not to insult her, to correct her. The way she spoke, the way she cried, the way she begged. He was practicing, she whispered, for someone else. The detectives froze. She told them he was building something. Not in the basement. In the garage. A second steel box. Smaller. Quieter. Mobile. She had heard the tools. The welding. The grinding. But the most chilling part came last. He said the next one wouldn't be in a house, Emily whispered. He said houses make people curious. She turned her head toward the window. And I ruined his schedule. Daniel Pierce never made it to trial. 3 weeks after his arrest, guards found him unresponsive in his cell during a routine check. No note. No explanation. Just another locked door, and another unanswered ending. But for detectives, the real fear didn't disappear with him. Because the garage workshop Emily described was real. Inside, investigators found partially welded steel panels. Vent slits already cut. A compact frame bolted to a rolling platform. Not finished. Not yet. Emily was placed into protective care under a different name. A different city. A different life. She asked for only one thing before she left the hospital. That the basement wall be destroyed completely. Not sealed. Not covered. Broken. Because, as she quietly told the officer holding her statement, if someone builds it once, they can build it again. And here is the part that should stay with you. Daniel didn't hunt in alleyways. He didn't stalk online. He didn't break into homes. He waited for people to walk willingly into safe houses. Clean houses. Friendly houses. Right in ordinary neighborhoods. So ask yourself one question tonight. How well do you really know what's behind the walls next door?